Hello friends, and welcome to part 3 of the Dynamic Window Blueprint tutorial series. In this part we're going to create the hover target widget, which will manage the core mouse events that we want to act on. First things first, let's switch over to our content browser. And in our content folder, let's create a new folder called Dynamic Window Widget. And I'm going to press enter to open it up. And we are going to create 3 widget blueprints. The first one we will call WBP underscore dynamic window. Then we'll do another one, WBP dynamic window title, if I can spell, title bar, dynamic window title bar. And we'll create one more called WBP underscore hover target. The dynamic window will be our window that we can move around and resize. The title bar will be part of the window, and the hover target will be part of both the title bar and the window. Let's go ahead and open each of these up. And I'm going to close the level blueprint for right now. I'm actually just going to save all. And let's go ahead and switch to our hover target. And we are going to delete the canvas. We will not be needing that. But let's come up here and grab an image and drop that on there instead. Let's call it image underscore hover target. And is variable should already be checked, but if it is not, go ahead and check that now. Alright, so this is going to be our hover target. And we basically need to know when is the mouse hovering over it and when is it not hovering over it. Let's go ahead and switch over to the graph. And over here next to functions, we're going to click the override drop down. And this gives us a list of all the functions that we can override. We actually want to grab OnMouseEnter. And then we want to come back up here and override OnMouseLeave. And the way these work, if we go back to our designer tab for a moment, when the mouse crosses the boundary from outside to inside, OnMouseEnter is fired. And then it won't fire again while you're on the inside until you go to cross the boundary again to leave. Then OnMouseLeave is called. Now, whenever we are inside, we actually want our cursor to change. And then when we're outside, we want it to go back to the default. So let's go back to our graph. And we are going to grab our player controller. And we're going to use that to get our current mouse cursor. So get current, and it's down here, get current mouse cursor. Now, we don't actually need its current value, but you see the type eMouseCursor enum? If we try to create a variable, that type is not available to us. But we can cheat. If we promote this to a variable, it adds it in as a type, and now we can actually use it. So let's change this to hover mouse cursor. Now we can actually delete these two nodes because we are not going to be using those for anything. And then next thing we'll do, we'll just go ahead and compile, save, And that way we can click our mouse cursor and scroll down to the bottom and set a default value. Now right now the default is a none, which we never want to use none because there would be no cursor. We actually want to change this to default, which is the cursor you see on the screen right now. Now, whenever the mouse cursor is hovering over our hover target, we want to set the mouse cursor to be whatever the value of this hover mouse cursor variable is. Right now it's a default, but that's fine. And then whenever we leave the hover target, we actually want it to change back to the default. So let's do this. We'll go set current mouse cursor. We'll hook it up to MouseEnter, and we will feed in hover mouse cursor. And then we can do the same thing again, set current mouse cursor. We'll hook it up here, and we're just going to change this to default. So now, whenever we hover over top of our hover target, it's going to change the cursor to whatever this value is. And then whenever we leave, it's going to change it back to the default. Now, over on our hover mouse cursor, we're going to want to set instance editable and expose on spawn. If you're not familiar with how these two work, instance editable allows us to edit the variable in the details pane for the widget. For example, let's compile, save, and switch back over to our HUD. We're going to delete the checkbox. We're going to scroll down in the palette to user created. And let's grab our hover target and drop it onto the canvas. Doing this turns it into an instance of our hover target. If we were to drop 3 of them onto the canvas, we would actually have 3 separate instances of our blueprint hover target class. I'm going to go ahead and delete these 2. And if we look over here in the details pane for this instance, we have our variable that we set to instance editable hover mouse cursor. To see how it works, let's just change it to the eyedropper. We compile, save, and press play. You have an eyedropper when you hover over it. Now you may have noticed that I had to click into the screen in order for that to start working. I don't like how that behaves, so I'm going to escape out, and I'm going to reopen the level blueprint for a moment. And we are going to grab the return value for the HUD widget that we created and hook it up to In Widget To Focus. And clean this up just so that it's easy to know what we're looking at. And basically the way this works is when the HUD is created and it's added to the viewport, this is going to switch input modes and set the focus to be the HUD widget, so we don't have to click into the viewport before it starts responding to our mouse events. So now if we compile, save, and press play, I can just simply move the mouse over it. I don't have to click at all. Alright, so that is, go back to our HUD. That is instance editable. It allows us to modify it in the details pane whenever we create an instance. Alright, so what about expose on spawn? If we go back to our level blueprint and just type create widget, and if we change the class to be our hover target, you'll see that we have hover mouse cursor. This is our expose on spawn variable that we set up, and we could actually select a cursor from here. Now, we're not actually going to be creating any widgets at runtime, so we can just go ahead and delete this for now. And with that, I think we'll wrap up part 3 here. In part 4, we'll work on creating the title bar for our window. See you then.